All right. Anybody else thinking about it? All right, Zoom, always great to have you on board. I will now turn the meeting over to Kevin.
Thanks, Kevin. My name is Kevin, very grateful recovered alcoholic. Grateful to be at 149 Clinton. Thank you to the group for this opportunity to be of service. If this is your first time here, welcome. We're a group that does a line-by-line detailed examination of the Big Book. It's loosely modeled after the Sierra workshops that we attended throughout the 90s. If you're new in recovery or coming back around, perhaps you might find something that might help you solve your problem, right? It's important for me to give credit to the man who carried us through the book in this fashion. I will be eternally grateful to the man that facilitated the Sierra workshops. I did not know the impact that he was having on my life until the years started to unfold. Grateful to this group and grateful that it's a Monday night. So we are, let's jump right in the text. Because there's a couple of concepts that I want to touch base on tonight. So we're in the doctor's opinion, and the themes that they were talking about was the doctor's consensus is that the chronic alcoholic was doomed, right? And for us, that means doomed to repeat the experiment, doomed to falter. We might say doomed to relapse or doomed to pick up, right? But the problem for the real alcoholic is we suffer from this thing called denial. We suffer from this thing called self-delusion. We suffer from a condition that tells us we do not have this condition, right? And what I'm doing is enough. I don't need to go to the extremes that some of you folks may have to go to, especially when they start to introduce the concept that you may be suffering from a condition which only a spiritual experience will conquer. And where we left off in the doctor's opinion, on the top of 29, Roman numeral 29 in a third edition, or Roman numeral 31 in a fourth edition, where the doctor says, what's the solution? And so we went at length in the recent weeks taking a look at what the solution is. And we made the comparison from doomed. If you're doomed, the doctor regarded us as hopeless because his experience was that most of us never got better, right? That was their experience. And if most of us are not getting better, then he was saying that your cases are too heartbreaking. He considered them to be hopeless. And so many doctors didn't have the courage to tell you or the spouse or somebody impacted by the alcoholic condition that the dynamic is hopeless, right? And so what we read was that unless locked up, right, may die or go insane. These are some of the alternatives, and we hear that jails, institutions, and death. But and then we went to a page, and they said, the doctor's consensus is that most chronic alcoholics are 100% hopeless, not even 97.5% hopeless, 100% hopeless. And then they introduced the solution apart from divine help, right? Which implies that we need God's help, right? It implies that we're going to need a miracle, and we went over that at length recently, right? That from a hopeless condition to being full of hope, right? And then when you're full of hope, people are attracted to you like never before. When you're full of hope, the thing that produces that hopefulness starts to shine and show through you. And others are drawn to you. Hey, what do you have? And I'm going to use a term that they used about 85 years ago. Hey, what do you got on the ball, right? That just means what's going on with you, because you're different than I ever remember you being. And it's not, you're just not drinking. There's something, sometimes we'll say, radically different about you. So when we're into the solution, the text says new power flows in. If your problem is powerlessness, and that was read earlier tonight, we admitted we were powerless. So I'm driving these points home because we're going to segue from this into tonight's study. if your dilemma and you're admitted you're powerless, but now new power starts to flow in, if you are a cup or a vessel that's empty, powerless, nothing in there, right? We won't argue that there's nothing in there. But if new power starts to flow in and it starts to fill up with new power, then the vessel is no longer empty or void of power, right? That's just a rational argument. I'm a rational kind of guy. Right? That makes sense to me. And so as new power flows in, what if an abundance of new power flows in to where the cup starts to brim over? And then people go, what do you got on the ball? Something's different about you. You start to react different, right? It says we have a profound change in our reaction to life. See, that's the fruits of tapping into this divine power, which produces recovery, and a byproduct of that is abstinence. Not just not drinking, but contented abstinence. So on the top of 29, the doctor says, what is the solution? It's 29 in the 3rd edition, it's 31 in the 4th edition. Look what the doctor responds with. Perhaps I can best answer that question, what's the solution? Because it's hard for him to quantify. It's hard for them to put into words that which is unexplainable. It's a phenomenon, right? What's the solution? Perhaps I can best answer this by relating one of my experiences. Great, not sharing a belief, idea, or theory, or a suggestion. He's drawing upon his experience, right? Not just giving you an opinion, although the title of the chapter is Doctor's Opinion. But we've renamed it in my book as Expert Formal Judgment. Okay, pressing on. So he knows by experience, pressing on. About 1 year prior to this experience, a man was brought in to be treated for chronic alcoholism. There's that term, just recurring. Wasn't your little drinking mishaps? Didn't they start to progress? Didn't they start to become more frequent? That which I was doing once every couple of weeks started to happen about every other weekend, or every weekend. And that which I was doing on the weekend started to happen on Thursday through Sunday. Right? So the chronic aspect of this started to surface. That's just recurring, ongoing, persistent. Was your drinking and drugging, right? Or whatever your dilemma is, did it start to become recurring? Did it start to recur more frequently? That's chronic. So the doctor's saying that this guy was brought in to be treated for just that, chronic alcoholism. He had but partially recovered from a gastric hemorrhage, so he hadn't fully recovered. He had only partially recovered at this time. They're referencing to Hank Parkhurst, but let's press on. So he had partially recovered from a gastric hemorrhage and seemed to be a case of pathological mental deterioration, right? Which, and I looked some of those terms up, is that he was becoming dull and listless, and the alcohol was having an effect on his brain. He was starting to show signs of what they said was reminiscent of like becoming in a coma. It was just dull and listless, right? Semi-comatose. Pressing on. It said he had lost everything worthwhile in life. Did you start to lose things, and did that bring you into a 12-step room in the first place? Was there pain? Was there loss? Was there suffering? Right? See, this man had lost everything worthwhile in life and was only living, one might say, to drink. This is the doctor's opinion, right? Now look at this. He frankly admitted and believed that for him there was no hope. See, that's step one. He admitted and believed that for him there was no hope, right? I'm doomed. I can't not do this thing. There was no lurking reservation, right? I can't not drink. So for him there was no hope. That's step one. He admitted to his innermost self that he was doomed to drink again, right? Hopelessness. Following the elimination of alcohol, where was it eliminated? In the hospital. He was removed. Alcohol was removed from him. Following the elimination of alcohol, there was found to be no permanent brain injury. Okay? Thank God. Then look at this. The doctor says that he accepted the plan outlined in the book, right? Which is that we make a decision to pursue this course of action. I'm powerless. I'm hopeless. Are you willing to entertain the concept that a power greater than yourself can solve your dilemma? I think so, right? That's open-mindedness, that maybe I need God's help, even if we don't call it God from the outset. Some of us call it other things like HP, like Spirit of the Universe, right? Those sorts of things. But he accepted the plan outlined in this book. And before we get into the transformation, because there was a transformation, let's take a look at what the authors suggest the plan to be. And the plan that, as we know it today, because the text tells us so, right? But the plan also that they understood 90 years ago, right? So from here, go forward to page 50, 50. And we go to 50 often for reference, so we're just going to touch and go on page 50. And go to the fourth paragraph down. It's the last paragraph on page 50. And go to the second line in there. And I think we read this last week, where it says they flatly declare. So here's the plan. They flatly declare that since they've come to believe in a power, right, which is our step 2, right? Are you hopeless? Yes. Do you believe in a power? I think so, right? So you come into the belief of a power, what? Greater than yourself. And then to take a certain attitude towards that power. That's the step 3 angle, right? God is going to be our director. Turn our will and our life over to the care of God, right? For God to build with us and to do with us. So that's to take a certain attitude towards that power. Remember, it's capital P, that's G-O-D. And to do certain simple things. Oh, there's more, right? And in doing those certain simple things, there's been a revolutionary change in their way of living and thinking. What's that got to do with alcoholism? I say this all the time. Nothing and everything. See, pursuing this spiritual solution will relieve us of our alcoholism. Hogwash. How do we know that? They tell us so. And then it's becoming countless people's experience in the circles of influence around us. Countless. I can't even number how many people have tapped into the solution and have gotten free of the drink problem. Not even a worry or a woe about it. Completely free. And dare they start to use terminology like recovered alcoholic. Because that word is frowned upon in certain fellowship circles, like it's not possible. Well, it isn't possible of my own making, so that sentence is true. It's not possible. God does it. I can't perform a miracle, but God can, and now my mind is open to the fact that he can and will do this, and what was read earlier tonight, God can and will if we seek him. Right? And the original manuscript said just that, and see that God can and will. And when they put it in print, it said God could and would what? Solve your alcoholic dilemma if we seek him, if he were sought. Okay, let's do this. Reading on. Revolutionary change in their way of living and thinking in the face of collapse and despair. So in the face of that hopelessness, in the face of total failure of their human resources, they found that a new power flowed into them, that new peace flowed into them, that new happiness flowed into them. Oh, and a sense of direction flowed into them. See, that which was empty, my vessel was void of those things. Now those things start to flow in because they're riding on the wings of my higher power. That's just terminology I can use today, right? If we've carefully followed directions, accepting the plan, not modifying the plan, accepting the plan as prescribed, as indicated, right? If I accept the plan, if I carefully follow directions, we've begun to sense, so we become aware of something. If you sense something, you're becoming aware of it. See, somebody invites you over to dinner, and you walk in the house, and it just smells lovely. Something savory is cooking. You sense that there's something yummy going to happen, right? So you sense, you got an awareness, something's going on, right? If we carefully follow directions, we've begun to sense the flow of his spirit into us. Oh my gosh, God's doing this, right? See, we'll intuitively know that God is doing for me what I can't do for myself, right? And so that's the point that we had emphasized the last couple of sessions. Okay, so accepted plan outlined in the book. Go forward to 292 in a third edition or 263 in a fourth edition, Frank. And let's take a look at the plan that they knew of it then. 292 in a third edition or 263 in a fourth edition. It's in the chapter, He Sold Himself Short. And at the very top of the page, it says it was Dr. Bob's afternoon off. Okay? If you have a third edition, it mentions the day of the week. It's going to be 292 in there. Okay? All right. Pressing on. So it was Dr. Bob's afternoon off. He had me down to the office, and we spent 3 or 4 hours formally going through the 6-step program as it was at that time, right? So here's the plan. Complete deflation. Are you broken? Are you deflated? Is there no wind in your sails? Do you feel hopeless, right? Completely. Well, I don't know. I think I can still. That's not complete deflation. Our text tells us, leave that person alone for a while and see if they really have this condition, because in short order, they will be back, right? It's complete deflation. And then it's dependence and guidance from a higher power. So it's dependence on God and guidance from God, right? And then it's moral inventory. Then it's confession on what you've discovered in your moral inventory. Then restitution, the things that you have realized that you've done to your fellows, you make right, you restore them, you reconcile to the best of your ability. Why? Because this restores right relations between you and your higher power. It says it in our text. See to it that your relationship with him is right. See, when I step on the toes of my fellows, lie, cheat, steal, rob, hurt, right? My higher power is not pleased with that. It stresses my relationship with him. I get blocked off from the sunlight of the Spirit. But when I have contrition, fancy word for sincere sorrow for how I carried myself. See, but what happens is we stuff those feelings. Shame, guilt, embarrassment, remorse, we stuff them. And we start to get blocked off from this vibrancy of life, right? This happy, joyous, and free feeling that we had when we were a child. See, that starts to get restored, right? Because we're like babes in our higher power's eyes, but children. I went off on a beautiful inspiration. I won't call it a tangent tonight. So restitution. And then they said continued work with others. They put other alcoholics, but they derived this from the Oxford groups, which their step 6 was continued helpfulness to others. Right? Now pressing on. Dr. Bob led me through this course of action. Dr. Bob led me through this plan of action, led me through all of these steps. At the moral inventory, he brought up some of my bad personality traits or character defects, such as selfishness, conceit, jealousy, carelessness, intolerance, ill temper, sarcasm, and resentment. I had all of those. My wife will say still has a few of them at times, right? But the point is, we went over these at great length. Didn't gloss over them. We went over them at great length. Then he finally asked me if I wanted these defects of character removed. When I said, yes, I do, we both knelt at his desk and prayed. See, that's how they carried themselves. They humbled themselves before the higher power. They knew who and what their higher power was. They named him if you asked him who their higher power was. But as far as the text is concerned, the hoop is wide so that we can begin to make the approach, so that we're not pushed away because of a specific terminology that might be used. Right? But if you want these defects of character removed, in that moment of humility, when you realize that, gosh, these things are me, of course I want them removed because they're icky, they're yucky, nobody likes them, right? They keep me from being loved by the people who I want to receive love from. So if my defects are removed, it allows people to draw nearer to me, and I start to connect with people at levels like I didn't before. Okay, do we want them removed? Yes, we both we both knelt at his desk and prayed, each of us asking to have these defects taken away. See, this was the plan that this man had accepted, that the doctor's going to reference the transformation. See, this is the plan that allows God to come in to produce the change which produces transformation. And change and transformation is redundant, right? See, a change sufficient enough to bring about recovery from alcoholism. That's what they're talking about, okay? And it made an impact. Look at the next paragraph. This picture is still vivid. Why? Because it made an impact. See, if I live to be 100, it will always be vivid to me. It will always stand out in my mind. It was very impressive, and I wish that every AA could have what? The benefit of this type of sponsorship today. See, for that, I'm responsible. right? That's the AA responsibility statement. That's what we are responsible for. To be able to carry this message and transmit this plan. And it looks attractive. Why? Because I've done it and I'm tapping into this power and God's Spirit is flowing into me like He is to countless others. It's not just one or two individuals. It's all of us are eligible to have this experience. But Derek asked me many years ago, Kevin, if that's not your experience, why not? What part of you stands in the way between you and having this experience, right? Pressing on. As Dr. Bob always emphasized the religious angle very strongly, and I think it helped. Look what he says, I know it helped me. Dr. Bob then led me through the restitution step, in which I made a list of all persons that I had harmed, and I worked out ways and means of slowly making restitution. See, this man was engaged in a spiritual way of life. What are the fruits of that? Glad you asked. Let's go back into the doctor's opinion. Roman numeral 29. Or, is it 29 in everybody's book? 29 or 31 respectively. Thank you. Oh, it's right in front of me. There we go. Okay, pressing on. So he accepted the plan outlined in this book. 1 year later, he called to see me, and I experienced a very strange sensation. I knew the man by name and partly recognized his features, but there all resemblance ended. From a trembling, despairing, nervous wreck. And see, don't when we crawl into detox or we crawl into treatment centers or we sheepishly go into a 12-step room and sit in the back. Nothing wrong with sitting in the back, right? But we sit in the back and, trembling and despairing, right? Full of worry and woe. How did this come to be? Is my life resigned to this? Hope nobody sees me. All those sorts of feelings of being uncomfortable in our own skin, right? See, this is what he's talking about. From a trembling, despairing, nervous wreck. See, normal as far as we could see, except for a nervous disposition. See, it's that nervousness that makes for constant drinking, right? Pressing on. From a trembling, despairing, nervous wreck. From a trembling, despairing, nervous wreck had emerged a man brimming over with self-reliance and contentment. See, something had emerged from that. From that low point, from that despair, had emerged something great, right? Something wonderful, something attractive, something indescribable, right? Do we want to do that? Yeah. So why not? Why not? So he's talking about transformation, right? Let's do this. If you have a fourth edition, go to page 570. 570. If you have a third edition, go to 572. See, brimming over with self-reliance, no longer insecure, no longer afraid, no longer worried about what people think of you. So I was having a conversation with a member earlier, outgrowing the fear of the commentary of one or two people in the peanut gallery. See, the commentary of one or two people in the peanut gallery used to crush me. And I wouldn't see that 3 or 4 or 5 people were inspired by one or two things that was said, right? It's about outgrowing that. So in the medical view, if you go to that respective page, 570 or 572, depending on your text, go to the second paragraph down where it's Dr. John F., and I'm going to call him Stouffer. I think that looks like that pizza, right? Okay. So chief psychiatrist at the General Hospital in Philadelphia, citing his experience with AA, right? Said, the alcoholics we get here at Philly General, are mostly those who cannot afford private treatment. And AA is by far the greatest thing we have been able to offer them. See, and sometimes we sarcastically say, oh yeah, they just channel us to a 12-step room, right? Like there was anything else for them to offer to us, right? Like we were well above that, right? I could have found AA, but I didn't. The yellow pages, whatever those things are, right? But they channel us there because what are they seeing? They're seeing people get this thing, right? So AA is by far the greatest thing we've been able to offer them. Even among those who occasionally land back in here again, we call that relapse, right? Even in those, we observe what? A profound change in personality, right? See, look what he goes on to say. You would hardly recognize them, right? The doctor's going to say, I could hardly bring myself to think that I've ever known him. Do this. We got a little bit of time. Go into Bill's story all the way to the front of the book. Go to page 9. And on page 9, go to the first paragraph at the top of the page. See, Bill did not expect to see this. First paragraph down. The door opened and he stood there, expected to see his friend, but he did not expect to see this. Fresh-skinned and glowing, right? There was something about his eyes. He was inexplicably different. See, something was going on in him that he didn't quite understand. What did the doctor say about Bill some months later? Something's going on in you, Bill, that I don't quite understand. You're inexplicably different. Whatever you got, you better hang on to it. See, the power is starting to flow. And I say this often. What does a light bulb do? All argue that a light bulb does nothing unless power courses through it, right? See, then the lights are on. Then the life-giving energy starts to get transmitted through you, just a little light bulb. That's all we are, is little light bulbs in God's hands, right? To draw others nearer to him, right? Just like a lighthouse, right? I see you got this thing going on. I wish I can get it. I'm just a shipwreck. Well, follow the light. Let the beacon of light draw you into safe harbor, right? Yes, we're painting pictures, but that imagery is exactly telling the story of what goes on in Alcoholics Anonymous. Love and light and hope is offered here, and it's available to you, even the shipwreck, right? Go to page 11. And on page 11, go to the third paragraph down. Okay. Third paragraph down says, but my friend sat before me and he made the point blank declaration that God had done for him what he could not do for himself. So he told Bill, this is what happened. God's done this for me. Whatever you see in me, I take no credit for it, right? God had done this for him. He goes on to tell a story. He goes, what got into you? Pushed him a drink. Hey, what's gotten into you? Well, he said, my human will had failed. Doctors had pronounced him incurable, right? That's hopeless. If you're incurable, that's hopeless. You're doomed to experience this condition for the rest of your life if it's incurable, right? See, society was about to lock him up. Ooh, been there, right? Like myself, he had admitted complete defeat. See, what did they say? Complete deflation, right? He had admitted complete defeat. Look at the word admit. Admit is to let in. Let into your consciousness that you're defeated, right? He said, then he had an effect from being completely defeated to something else happening. Here comes the miracle. Then he had an effect, been raised from the dead, suddenly taken from the scrap heap, shipwreck, to a level of life into the harbor better than the best he had ever known. Who and what did this? He already told us God did, right? Go two paragraphs down. Look what Bill says. That floored me, right? I don't think it ruined his buzz, but it floored him nevertheless. He goes on to say, it began to look as though religious people were right after all. Here was something at work in a human heart. What's at work in the human heart? God's Spirit is. Here's something at work in the human heart, which has done the impossible. My ideas about miracles were drastically revised right then. See, from being closed-minded to the possibility that a miracle can occur to that concept being drastically revised, right? Bill's mind started opening up right then. Right? Never mind the musty past about miracles back in yesteryears. Never mind the musty past. Here sat a miracle directly across the kitchen table. And when a spiritually awakened alcoholic sits across a table from you, that seems to be different, seems to be glowing, doesn't talk the way he used to talk to you 27 years ago when you guys were smoking crack across the table from one another. I got sponsees, they talk about that. The very same table that we were banging heroin at, now we're cracking the big book, and their mother is overjoyed that these characters are finding God, right? See, yeah, tangent, it's all good. Inspiration. So in fact, he had been raised up, suddenly taken from the scrap heap to a level of life better than the best he had ever known. That floored him. It began to look as though religious people were right after all. Something at work in a human heart. Go down to the very last paragraph on page 11. See, he began to see. He said, I saw that my friend was much more than inwardly reorganized. See, he could have said, I saw that my friend was inwardly reorganized. But my friend was much more than that. See, oh, you're different. You done a little emotional shuffle, right? You done a little self-help spin, read a little self-help manual, and you're spitting out, cute little sayings. But wait till you don't get your way, right? Let's see how radical that transformation is, okay? Much more than inwardly reorganized. Look, he was on a different footing. His roots grasped a new soil, right? That's it. That's it. Let's go back into the doctor's opinion, because I'm going to run out of time. It's all good. Okay. So he accepted the plan outlined in the book. 1 year later, he called to see me. I experienced a very strange sensation. I knew the man by name and partly recognized his features, but there all resemblance ended. From a trembling, despairing, nervous wreck, he had emerged a man brimming over with self-reliance and contentment. I talked with him for some time, but was not able to bring myself to feel that I had ever known him. See, what a statement that doctor can make. Man, just a year ago I treated you, right? And you have similar features, but this man I've never met, right? The charts say I treated you, but I can't bring myself to say this version of you I've ever known, right? Pressing on. A long time had passed with no return to alcohol, right? We call that a significant period of abstinence, right? A long time had passed with no return to alcohol. Okay, pressing on. When I need a mental uplift, see, because sometimes the doctors would get discouraged because there was an endless stream of misery that came across the threshold into that hospital, right? Chronic relapsers, progressive deterioration, sadness, despair, hopelessness, families having to release their loved one to the undertaker, right? To the morgue, to the jails, to the hospitals, to the institutions. See, endless stream of misery. So sometimes I need a mental uplift, he says. When I need that, I often think of another case brought in by a physician prominent in New York. The patient had made his own diagnosis, and don't we often? The patient had made his own diagnosis, and deciding his situation hopeless. See, that's the diagnosis. I'm doomed. I'm hopeless. There's no hope for me. And he had hidden in a deserted barn, determined to die. He was rescued by a searching party. I always say that was often his wife and some neighbors, right? He was rescued by a searching party and in desperate condition brought to me. See, following his physical rehabilitation, which we know the doctor says typically takes 2 to 3 days, 48 to 72 hours, but following that rehab, he had a talk with me in which frankly stated he thought the treatment was a waste of time. How many times did we say that? Through a smile. When somebody goes, hey, I got a treatment for you. Okay, right? But in the back of our mind, we're going, that's a waste of time, right? See, but he had the courage to at least be honest with the doctor and say, you know what, doc, that's a waste of time. I've tried everything known to man that I could possibly, get my hands on. It's a waste of time. That treatment was a waste of effort unless I could assure him, which no one ever had, that in the future he would have the willpower to resist the impulse to drink. See, no one had ever told him that in the future you would have the willpower to resist the impulse to drink. Well, no, I'm told that I will always be powerless. No. We go from powerless to new power flowing in to now having power. The doctor says easily able to control our desire for liquor, right? Which no one ever had. What they're referencing is that we've enjoyed an opportunity, and if you haven't, get with somebody who can prescribe this to you, that can speak from the language of the heart and could shine a light on your footpath so that you can grow into these experiences, right? So that you can enjoy the opportunity that they're talking about, right? Right. Keep your finger there and go forward to page 19. We're going to go right back, so keep your finger there. Page 19. Go to the second paragraph down on 19. Second paragraph down, where it says, if we keep on the way we're going, go down from there 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines. They're talking about people dropping into oblivion, right? The endless procession. But they go, many could recover, of those hopeless ones, many could recover, the ones that are dropping into oblivion, many could recover if they had the opportunity we have enjoyed. See, what we're trying to do is extend the hand so that more people have the opportunity that we've enjoyed, right? Now go to the next paragraph. We have concluded to publish an anonymous volume setting forth the problem as we see it. We shall bring to the task our combined experience and knowledge. This should suggest what? A useful program. See, the plan that's outlined in this book. This should suggest a useful program for anyone concerned with a drinking problem. Let's go back into the doctor's opinion. Okay. See, the treatment is a waste of effort unless you can promise me that I'll be able to say no when I need to say no. Right? That he will have the willpower. Well, what looks like willpower to some, and I shared the story that family members were convinced that I had more willpower than some other family members. They were convinced of that. They were convinced that abstinence is a willpower exertion exercise. And that you're just lucky you've got more willpower than some of the family members that drank themselves to death or took their lives in the frustration and misery over chronic addiction, right? But willpower is really look how it's in quotes. They're talking about new power. Not my power, not my willpower, new power, right? So unless they could assure him, which no one ever had, what did Bill Wilson say in 1941? Glad you asked. Bill Wilson said, our first responsibility to the newcomer is an adequate presentation of the program. That's our first responsibility to you, whoever the you is. That's new to what? This way of life. I could have 7 years abstinence and still be new to this way of life, right? So my responsibility, my first responsibility, is an adequate presentation of the program to him or her, right? To be that living big book and to be able to articulate the course of action that I've already undertaken, right? Not minced up to be acceptable to me, not chopped up to be okay for my family, not pulling out just the parts that are acceptable to the people in my circles, right? Pressing on. Let's go back to page 30, I think we're on, right? 29. Doctor's opinion, Roman numeral 29. Okay, very last paragraph on Roman numeral 29 or 31, depending on your text. It says, his alcoholic problem was so complex, and this is the doctor saying, his alcoholic problem was so complex and his depression was so great that we felt his only hope would be through what we then called moral psychology. That just means moral development, right? Morality, right? That's what they then called it moral psychology rather than find God now and live by spiritual principles, because that was probably frowned upon in the medical fraternity, right? His only hope would be through what we then called moral psychology, and we doubted even that would have any effect, right? Go to the next page. However, he did become sold on the ideas what? Contained in this book. See, there's ideas, spiritual concepts, spiritual principles. That's what's contained in this book. And they aren't hidden in this book. I just have to crack this book, and they literally jump off the page to me when my mind is open and my heart is seeking. God could and would if he were sought. So he did become sold on the ideas contained in this book. And look, he has not had a drink for a great many years. So this is one that the doctor had considered hopeless. He decided himself as hopeless, but he has not had a drink for a great many years. Look what the doctor says. I see him now and then, and he is as fine a specimen of manhood as one could wish to meet. And it's not necessarily talking about his physical features. Sexy as heck, right? Handsome as can be. I'm sure that they got some of that fresh skin stuff going on. But no, they're talking about character, right? As fine a specimen of manhood as one could wish to meet, right? With grace and dignity and character and perseverance and integrity and honesty and courage and faith and hope, right? That's man. If you're going to list the specs for a man of good character, those would be top of the list, wouldn't they? Right? We're going to jump off the page, okay, Frank? Go forward to page 153. I got just a few minutes. 153. See, he was radically changed. What's that but a miracle of transformation? 153, and go to the first paragraph down on 153. First paragraph down, it may seem incredible that these men are to become happy, respected, and useful once more. It may seem incredible. How can it be? How can it be? How can they rise out of such misery? Bad repute, that's bad reputation, and hopelessness. How can they rise out of that? The practical answer is that since these things have happened among us, they can happen with you. Who are they speaking to? You, the reader. They're speaking to everyone who's got the text in front of them this very evening, right? But there's a condition. They can happen with you should you wish them above all else and be willing to make use of the plan outlined in this text, which involves simply a belief in God, developing a dependence and a reliance upon God, doing certain simple things, confession, restitution, and helpfulness to others. See, make use of their experience. Look what they say. Here's a promise. We are sure they will come for you, right? Not like, oh, they're coming for you. We're sure these things will come. The age of miracles is still with us. Do you want a miracle? See, if you're new to this, that's what's offered here is miracles. Alcoholics Anonymous doesn't distribute the miracles. God does. Alcoholics Anonymous points you towards the miracle maker. That's just what I referenced, this thing that is really can't be referenced, but there's a lot of literature that points to it. Let's do one more. Go back where we left off, Roman numeral 30. 30 or 32, right? Okay. Look what the doctor says. So he became sold on the ideas which is God in a program of action, right? Now here's the doctor, Medical Society, that says this: I earnestly advise every alcoholic to read this book through. Be thorough in it. I glossed over it. I'll tell that story next week when we finally get to page 1. I earnestly advise every alcoholic to read this book through. And though perhaps he came to scoff, he may remain to pray. See, I had to look up scoff, right? It means to mock or make fun of. It means to belittle, or how about this? To dismiss. See, these spiritual concepts that were introduced to me when I was 20 and 22 and 23, I scoffed and merely dismissed them. I poked fun, right? And I wasn't so kind at times, right? But then I looked, and there was it took me to, when I was researching last night, it took me to reasons why people scoff. I went, oh, that'll be interesting. So I went there, and the first one in bold letters says insecurity. I'm not insecure, right? Insecurity. Here's this, envy. Envy was number 2. See, I want what you have, but I'm jealous that you got it. I want you to be miserable. And I'm just going to keep waiting until I watch you be miserable. And I'm going to throw pop shots your way to watch you falter and say, ha, this thing is not real. But when you really lean into God through thick and thin, watch how you weather things. And your skin doesn't become thicker, God becomes your shield, right? Because we still have sensitivity. It says it in our text, it takes many of us quite a number of years, I'm going to paraphrase, quite a number of years to outgrow that very serious handicap called sensitivity. But when he goes before us, nothing can stand against us. When the arrows fly, God's got to go before you so that it's okay, even when a human being is being human with sarcasm and cynicism and scoffing and mocking, right? It also said why? Because we're competitive, we compete, and disbelief. I think a lot of my scoffing came from disbelief. I disbelieved in God, and I disbelieved in what you were telling me God was doing for you. I had fear that you were trying to sell me a book or get me to do something or shave my head and wear a red robe and beads and go sell flowers at the airport because I saw an after-school special when I was a kid, and that's what churchy people did. And I said, uh-oh, I'm going to be that. I'm out of AA, right? A couple years later, I was right back again. But what they're talking about is contempt prior to investigation, right? And I'm running out of time. I'm out of time. But let's do this. I won't do everything I want to do, but go to page 48. They're talking about scoffing. They're saying, perhaps you came to scoff. The doctor's hope is that you remain to pray. Page 48. And at the top of the page on 48, it says this, very top, it says, we often found ourselves handicapped by obstinacy, sensitivity, and unreasoning prejudice. Many of us have been so touchy that even casual references to spiritual things made us bristle with antagonism. So we scoffed, we mocked, we poked fun at, we talked about when we're not around, we talked about them. When they're not around, we talked about them. See, that's immaturity and childishness. Be mindful not to slip into that, right? And to engage in that. See, stand on your spiritual legs and share your experience, strength, and hope in the face of scoffing and mockery, right? To thine own self be true. It says this sort of thinking had to be what? Abandoned. Scoffing, contempt had to be abandoned. Go forward to page 215 in a 4th edition, page 504 in a 3rd edition. That's 215 in a 4th, 504 in a 3rd edition. We're going to close with this. Go to second paragraph. It's near the top where it says, I get out of bed and go to the man's room. Right? This is our southern friend. I get out of bed and go to the man's room. He's reading. I must ask you a question. I say to the man, how does prayer fit into this thing? See, what did the doctor say? Though perhaps he came to scoff, they may remain to pray. So how does prayer fit in this thing? Glad you asked. He said, well, he answers, you probably tried praying like I have. When you've been in a jam, you've said, God, please do this or that. And if it turned out your way, that was the last of it. And if it didn't turn out your way, you said, there isn't any God. Prayer thing don't work, right? He doesn't do anything for me. Is that right? Yes, I reply. That's exactly how I pray. Look what he says. That isn't the way. That isn't how we pray here, right? He continued. So he didn't just say, that isn't how we prayed and scurried off. He shared with them some prayer concepts. Be bold. Be courageous. Share with people how you're praying. That isn't the way. The thing I do is I say, God, here I am. And here are all my troubles. I made a mess of things and I can't do anything about it. You take me, right? You take me and all of my troubles and do anything you want with me. Does that answer your question? Yes, it does. And so this chapter is our southern friend, and there was a transformation. I'm out of time, so I'm just going to give you a reference in your personal studies. Take a look at our southern friend in the text that you have here, right? But take a look at our southern friend in the first edition. I don't quite know why they pulled out the last 2 paragraphs in all the editions that followed. But this is this man today. Well, not today, but what he wrote in the first edition. It says, sensuality, drunkenness, and worldliness satisfy a man for a time, and doesn't it? Sensuality, drunkenness, and worldliness, it satisfies us. But their power is a decreasing one. God produces harmony in those who receive his spirit and follow its dictates. Today, as I become more harmonized within, I become more in tune with all of God's wonderful creation. Waking up. A whole new world is coming into view. The singing of the birds, the sighing of the wind, the patter of raindrops, the laughter of happy children, they all add to the symphony with which I am now in tune. The heaving ocean, the driving rain, the autumn leaves, the stars of the heaven, the perfume of flowers, music, a smile, and a host of other things, they tell me of the glory of God. See, he's seeing his higher power in all things. He's waking up to the fact that God is everything or else he's nothing, right? There are periods of darkness, but the stars are still shining no matter how black the night. There are disturbances, but I have learned that if I seek patience and open-mindedness, understanding will come. And with it, with that understanding, direction by the Spirit of God. The dawn comes, and with it, more understanding, the peace that passes all understanding, and the joy of living that is not disturbed by the wildness of circumstances or by people around me. Fears, resentments, pride, worldly desires, worry, and self-pity no longer possess me. Ever increasing are the number of true friends. Ever growing is the capacity for love. Ever widening is the horizon of understanding. But above all else, as if that wasn't enough, above all else comes a greater thankfulness to and a greater love for our Father in heaven. Wow, spiritual awakening. Thank you so much for letting me facilitate tonight.